Hi everyone. Should be Wednesday's lesson, so that would be January 2nd, and our aim is going to be, sorry for that noise, what is the Pythagorean theorem? So I'll give you a few seconds to copy that down. So it's important that you know this because there will be a question that will require the Pythagorean theorem on the final exam. We had a great PowerPoint for you guys on this, but this is going to have to do. Okay, so what is the Pythagorean theorem? And since this has been emailed to all of you, anything that, like, if you don't have time to copy, you can just watch it on your own. You go to the library or watch it at home, and then get more notes. Okay, so we're talking about the Pythagorean theorem today, and the Pythagorean theorem can only be used in right triangles. Okay, so of course this is a right triangle because it contains a right angle. And the measure of a right angle is always going to be 90 degrees. And hopefully we all know this. And if it doesn't say 90 degrees, but it has the little square, then you should know that that's a 90-degree angle. So anyhow, around 2,500 years ago, there was a Greek mathematician, and his name was Pythagoras. This is how you spell it. You don't need to know how to spell it, but it would be just interesting, I'm sure, for you. And this mathematician discovered a special relationship between the sides of right triangles. So this is what he realized, that if you have two legs of a triangle, so let's call this leg A and this leg B, and of course the other side is the hypotenuse over here, and we know it's the hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. We'll call the hypotenuse C. And he found a relationship that if you square the legs and then add them. So if you take this leg, which is A, so if you square it, and then you take this leg, B, and you square it, and you add them together, that they will always equal the hypotenuse squared. Okay, so I'll give you that more formally in a minute, but I'm going to give you some numbers which would make it a little bit easier. So let's say this is our right triangle, and this side is 3, and this is 4, then this side would have to be 5. And how would I know this? Because if I take one leg and I square it, and then I take another leg and I square it, and I add them together, it must equal the hypotenuse squared. So let's see if that's true. 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, and 5 squared is 25. And 25 obviously equals 25, and you can see it works. So sometimes you're given a question. I'm going to erase this 5. And it will say, what would make this, let me just erase all this as well. And you could be given this question and it will say, well, first it might say, is it a right triangle? And if this had originally said 5, then you would do what I just did, and you would say, yes, it has to be a right triangle because the Pythagorean theorem works. But let's say that you're just given this and you're asked to find this missing side or the missing hypotenuse. Well, then you would just take the leg squared, and you're going to add the other leg squared, and that would have to equal the hypotenuse squared. So you would get 9 plus 16 equals c squared, 25 equals c squared, and you have to take the square root of both sides to get that c alone. Okay, so you can take the square root of both sides, and the square root of 25 is 5, and that means that c would have to equal 5. Okay, so let's say that you had a multiple choice question and you're given something like this, and it said, gave you this, and it said, what value of x would prove that this is a right triangle? Let's say it was multiple choice and you had these 4 answers. So I'm just going to make up some numbers. Okay. So then you would have to say which one of these, if you put it into x, would satisfy the Pythagorean theorem. Well, you could just say one leg squared plus another leg squared has to equal the hypotenuse squared. Okay, so x squared plus 16 has to equal 25. Subtract 16 from both sides, and you get 9, and then when you take the square root of both sides, you get x equals 3, and that would be the answer B. Now, if you, let's say it was one of those questions where it said, like, Jimmy said that the leg should be 10. Is Jimmy right? then the way that you could prove that Jimmy is wrong is you could do 10 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. You're going to get 100 plus 16 equals 25. Clearly, that is not true. So you would say Jimmy is wrong, x cannot equal 10 because it does not satisfy the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, and I just want to bring up one other thing. So we had used the numbers 3, 4, and 5, and this is called a Pythagorean, you should copy this down, triple. And a Pythagorean triple is when the three values of the sides are all integers. And you can get more of these by just doing multiples of 3, 4, 5. So for example, if you multiplied every side by 2, you would get 6, 10, and 8. And you would see that 6 squared plus 8 squared will equal 10 squared, because 36 plus 64 does equal 100. So any multiples of these would be considered a Pythagorean triple. So you might be wondering, well, how could it not be a Pythagorean triple? Okay, so what if we have something like 4 and 6, and we're looking for this? So it would be a side squared plus a side squared equals the hypotenuse squared. 16 plus 36 has to equal x squared. 52 equals x squared. Take the square root of both sides and you get that x equals radical 52. Now 52 is not a perfect square, so that would be an example of how you get a value that's not an integer. Okay, sorry, I think I forgot to press record. I hope this is where we were at, otherwise I totally screwed this up and I apologize, but I'm sure someone can figure out whatever I screwed up. Okay, so here I set up our formula, leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared, and then I just did 10 squared and 26 squared to get that line. Then I subtracted 100 from both sides to get that line, which gave me this b squared equals 576. And then you take the square root of both sides. You should be using your calculator. We talked about the math function to do square roots, and you will get that b equals 24. So that would be your answer for that. Okay, so let's just try one more. So here's a right triangle. Here's some values for you. And then you're going to try and figure out what x is, so you should be pressing pause so you guys can all work on it, and then when you're done, then you can press play and see if you have the right solution. Okay, and here is your solution. Notice that I highlighted the hypotenuse, so this way I don't confuse that, and then I know that the hypotenuse always goes here by itself. Okay, so that pretty much finishes that. And what would be a good idea is for you to just like check your textbook tonight, or go online and look at Pythagorean theorem and just try some problems and make sure that you completely understand this, because you will, I'm guaranteeing that you're going to see this on the final. Okay, and you can just rewatch this, or if you get it, that's great. Okay, that finishes that.